Imagine a young blind girl protected by her horse against a hungry bear in the mountains. What happened that day changed an entire community forever. This is a true story of courage that will make you rethink everything about true love. Like, share, and get your tissues ready, because this emotional journey begins now. Thunder's whinny cut through the silence of that summer morning like a sharp blade slicing through the veil of tranquility. It wasn't the usual sound Sophia knew so well. That gentle nicker that greeted her every morning when she arrived at the stable with confident steps, guided only by the smell of hay and the warmth emanating from the animal's body. This time, there was urgency. There was fear. There was a warning that even without seeing, she could feel vibrating in every fiber of her being. The fog still hugged the mountains around Montana Ranch when everything began to change. Sophia was only 12 years old, but she carried in her small body a strength that defied any limitation. 3 years earlier, a devastating fever had stolen her sight, but not her determination. Where others saw darkness, she found a world of sounds, smells, and textures that most people would never notice. The wind whispered secrets through the leaves of the aspens, the damp earth told stories of past rains, and thunder, her majestic spotted Appaloosa, became the bridge between her and the visual world she had lost. Montana Ranch was more than a home. It was a sanctuary nestled in a valley protected by ancient mountains that seemed like eternal sentinels. There, 3 generations of the Smith family had built their lives in harmony with the wild nature that surrounded them. Samuel, Sophia's grandfather, knew every trail, every stream, every corner of those lands like the lines on his own calloused hands. It was he who had brought Thunder as a foal, 3 months after Sophia lost her sight, saying words she would never forget. Sometimes the light we need doesn't come from our eyes, but from the connection between souls that recognize each other. Michael and Karen, Sophia's parents, had struggled to accept their daughter's new reality. Doctors, therapists, specialists of all kinds had visited the ranch in the first few months, each with promises and prognoses that varied between hope and resignation. But it was Thunder who performed the true miracle. From the first encounter, when the young horse cautiously approached and gently blew on the girl's face, a communication was established that transcended words or traditional commands. Over the months, Sophia and Thunder developed their own language. 2 hoof taps meant obstacle ahead. 3 indicated they should turn right. A soft nicker was a sign that everything was okay, while a sharper one warned her to pay attention. The horse learned to guide her not only physically, but emotionally, coming closer when he sensed her sadness, moving slightly away when he perceived she needed to prove her independence. The ranch routine revolved around this extraordinary partnership. Every morning, Sophia woke with the first crow of the rooster, dressed herself alone with the clothes she meticulously organized the night before, and headed for the stable. The 200-yard path from the main house was her daily test of confidence. 50 steps to the garden gate, where the smell of lavender indicated she should turn slightly left. Another 100 steps following the sound of the creek running parallel to the path. Then the ground changed from grass to gravel, and she knew she was only 50 steps away from hearing Thunder's welcoming whinny. Thomas Miller was the region's veterinarian, but also something more. At 16, with wheat-colored hair and eyes that held the same kindness with which he treated animals, he had become a frequent presence at Montana Ranch. Officially, he came to help his father, Dr. Miller, with the care of Thunder and the other animals. But Sophia, with her keen perception for nuances others didn't notice, felt how his voice subtly changed when he spoke to her, how his steps lingered a little longer near the stable when she was around. The first time their hands touched was during a routine examination of Thunder. Thomas guided Sophia's hand to feel the horse's muscles, teaching her to identify signs of tension or discomfort. The touch lasted just a few seconds longer than necessary, but it was enough for both of them to know something had changed. From that day on, the veterinary visits became more frequent, and Thomas always found reasons to teach Sophia something new about equine care. Summer unfolded in its golden fullness when the first signs of change began to appear. The previous winter had been particularly harsh. with blizzards that isolated the valley for weeks. The wildlife had suffered, and whispers began to circulate among the ranchers about unusual sightings. Bears descending from the higher mountains, wolves approaching herds, the delicate balance between civilization and nature beginning to waver. Samuel was the first to notice the changes in Thunder's behavior. The horse, normally calm and predictable, began to show signs of restlessness during rides. His ears moved constantly, picking up sounds humans couldn't perceive. At night, instead of resting lying down as was his custom, he remained standing, vigilant, positioned to have a clear view of the forest surrounding the property. During the town's summer festival, Sophia and Thunder performed their annual presentation. It was a moment of pride for the entire community to see the blind young girl execute complex maneuvers with her horse, guided only by subtle touches and a mutual trust that left the audience in silent reverence. Thomas watched from the front row, and when Sophia dismounted after the perfect performance, it was he who received her, his hands holding hers for a moment before guiding her out of the arena. Karen observed the growing closeness between her daughter and young Miller with conflicting feelings. As a mother, she feared Sophia might get hurt emotionally, that her condition would make her vulnerable. But as a woman, she recognized the genuine care in Thomas's gestures, the way he treated Sophia not with pity, but with admiration for her strength. It was during a conversation with Samuel that she found peace. True love sees no limitations, only possibilities, the old sage said. The first subtle turn in the narrative came on a seemingly ordinary afternoon. Sophia was brushing Thunder when the horse suddenly raised his head. His nostrils flared, sensing something in the air. She felt the tension run through the animal's body like electricity. For long minutes, both remained motionless, until Thunder relaxed. But something fundamental had changed. From that day on, the horse began choosing different routes for their rides, systematically avoiding the trails leading north closer to the denser forest. The second sign came through Rebecca Johnson, the head park ranger. During a routine visit to the ranch, she casually mentioned they were monitoring an adult male grizzly bear that had been seen in areas increasingly close to rural properties. The animal, she explained, had likely had difficulties during the harsh winter, and now, with the premature awakening from hibernation, was hungry and potentially dangerous. Michael reacted immediately, his protective nature surfacing in full force. He set new rules. Sophia could only go out with Thunder accompanied. Rides should be limited to the open areas of the property, and an emergency horn was installed at strategic points. The tension between father and daughter grew like a summer thunderstorm, fast and intense. Sophia felt trapped, her hard-won freedom being snatched away by a fear she considered exaggerated. It was Thomas who served as a mediator in this conflict. During one of his visits, he found Sophia silently crying in the stable, Thunder nuzzling her shoulder gently in comfort. Without a word, he sat beside her on the hay, letting the silence speak first. When she finally vented her frustration, he listened without judgment, then shared his own story about a youthful accident that had left him temporarily unable to walk. The connection between them deepened in that moment of shared vulnerability. The third element of change manifested during a violent storm that hit the valley on a new moon night. Lightning illuminated the sky like veins of fire, and the wind howled through the trees with primitive fury. By morning, when the family inspected the damage, they discovered that an entire section of the northern fence had been knocked down by a fallen tree. The barrier between the ranch and the wild forest had been breached. While Michael and the AE workers hurried to repair the fence, Thunder showed increasing signs of agitation. The horse refused to eat properly. His eyes remained fixed on the opening in the fence, and for the first time since he arrived at the ranch, he whinnied throughout the night. Sophia, lying in her bed, heard the anxious sounds and felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. The next morning, unmistakable tracks were discovered in the damp soil near the damaged fence. Large, deep, with claws clearly visible. The bear had been there during the night, exploring the property's temporary vulnerability. Rebecca was called, immediately and confirmed what everyone feared. The animal was testing the limits, typical behavior of a predator evaluating potential food sources. The tension on the ranch became palpable. Karen barely slept, constantly checking the locks on doors and windows. Michael worked feverishly to reinforce all the fences, installing motion sensor lights around the perimeter. Samuel, meanwhile, maintained outward calm. But Sophia could hear the concern in his voice when he told his nightly stories, now, always including lessons about respecting and understanding predators. It was during this tense period that the fourth significant moment between Sophia and Thomas occurred. He had brought a gift, a small chain with a horseshoe-shaped pendant, made by his blacksmith grandfather. As he placed the chain around her neck, he explained that in his family's tradition, horseshoes protected not only against bad luck, but also guided the lost back home. Sophia held the pendant, feeling the metal warmed by his hands, and knew it was more than an amulet. It was a promise. The fifth important change came through a disturbing discovery. During a morning patrol, park rangers found the remains of a calf less than a mile from Montana Ranch. The bear had claimed its first domestic victim, crossing a line that drastically increased the danger to everyone in the region. An emergency meeting was called at the city hall, where strategies were discussed, from relocating the animal to more drastic measures. Sophia attended the meeting, accompanied by Thomas, and it was her voice that brought a different perspective. She spoke about coexistence, about how Thunder had taught her that communication between species was possible, that mutual fear only escalated conflicts. Her speech, articulate and passionate, touched many present, but the practical reality of immediate danger prevailed. It was decided to intensify efforts to capture and relocate the bear, but until then, severe restrictions were imposed. The definitive prohibition of unsupervised rides was the final straw for the most serious conflict between Sophia and her parents. Harsh words were exchanged, doors slammed, and for the first time since she lost her sight, Sophia felt truly imprisoned by her condition. Thunder, sensitive to his friend's emotional state, became lethargic, as if her sadness drained his own vitality. On a particularly difficult night, Samuel found Sophia in the stable, hugging Thunder, both in silence. The old man sat on a bale of hay and began to tell a story he had never shared before. He spoke about his youth, about an encounter with a mountain lion that could have ended in tragedy, but that turned into a moment of mutual understanding when he chose not to act out of fear, but out of respect. The lesson was clear. Fear is an important advisor, but it cannot be the sole guide of our actions. The sixth crucial turn happened when Thomas, trying to ease the tension, organized a surprise picnic for Sophia in an open field within the property, with a view of the mountains. As they shared food and light conversation, Thunder grazed peacefully nearby, always vigilant. It was in this moment of apparent peace that Thomas revealed his plans to study veterinary medicine at the State University, 300 miles away. The silence that followed was more eloquent than any words. Sophia felt the world tilt slightly, as if the ground beneath her feet had become unstable. But it was Thunder's reaction that surprised her. The horse approached and positioned himself between the two young people, gently nudging Thomas towards Sophia, as if saying that physical distances were irrelevant when true connections existed. The seventh significant event occurred on a cloudy morning when strangers arrived at the ranch. They were researchers from the university, interested in studying the extraordinary bond between Sophia and Thunder. Through a series of non-invasive tests, they documented the subtle communication between the two, the micro-expressions and signals that allowed for perfect coordination. Preliminary results suggested that Sophia's loss of sight had amplified other sensory capacities to exceptional levels. During these tests, something remarkable happened. One of the researchers accidentally dropped heavy equipment, creating a sudden crash. While everyone present startled, Sophia remained calm, as Thunder had shown no sign of alarm. This demonstration of absolute trust in the horse's perception deeply impressed the academics and reinforced what the community already knew. The pair had transcended conventional limitations of interspecies communication. The eighth change manifested through a recurring dream Sophia began to have. In it, she could see again, but only through Thunder's eyes. She saw the world in different shades, perceived threats invisible to humans, felt the vibration of the earth announcing distant approaches. When she shared these dreams with Samuel, he smiled knowingly and said that some bonds are so strong that they allow souls to lend senses to each other. It was on one of these nights of vivid dreams that Sophia woke with the absolute certainty that something was about to happen. Thunder was whinnying insistently outside, a sound she had never heard before, loaded with urgency and determination. Barefoot, she quietly descended the stairs, each step calculated not to wake her parents. The argument from the previous day still hung in the air like bitter smoke, and she knew leaving would be considered a betrayal of trust. But there was something in Thunder's call that transcended family rules. It was a primal appeal, a need she couldn't ignore. Upon reaching the kitchen door, she hesitated for a moment, her hand on the cold doorknob. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "You don't understand the real danger out there." But the answer came from her heart, with Samuel's voice. "The true danger is living with so much fear that we forget to live." The dawn mist enveloped Sophia like a damp cloak when she stepped outside. The air was still, heavy with the promise of rain. Thunder approached immediately, lowering his head so she could hold his mane. Together they moved to the stable, where Sophia, with movements practiced 1,000 times, saddled her companion. Each buckle, each adjustment was made with automatic precision, her hands knowing every detail of the equipment. The decision to go to the creek was not conscious. It was Thunder who chose the destination. Sophia trusted, as she had always trusted, even noticing the unusual tension in the horse's muscles under the saddle. The familiar path unfolded beneath Thunder's hooves. First the firm ground of the yard, then the soft earth of the trail, the sound changing as they crossed different terrains. The smell of damp pines indicated when they entered the wooded part of the route. They had traveled about 500 yards when Thunder stopped abruptly. It wasn't a common stop. It was complete immobilization. Every muscle of the horse contracted as if turned to stone. Sophia felt the animal's heart accelerate beneath her legs, felt his breathing become shallow and rapid. Instinctively, she also held her breath, all her senses sharpened, trying to capture what had alarmed her protector. The wind changed direction, and with it came the smell. Wild, musky, unmistakably predatory. Fear, that primitive emotion that exists to keep us alive, flooded Sophia's body like ice water. But along with the fear came clarity. The hours of training with Thunder, Samuel's lessons about animal behavior, the instincts developed through 3 years of visual darkness, all converged in a moment of crystalline understanding. The bear was close. Very close. Sophia could hear it now. The heavy breathing, the rustling of bushes being pushed aside by a massive body. Thunder began to back away slowly, each step calculated not to provoke an attack. Sophia remained perfectly balanced, trusting completely in the horse's judgment. It was then that she heard the low, guttural growl, less than 20 yards to her left. In her mind, Sophia visualized the scene as Thunder must have been seeing it. The bear partially emerging from the vegetation, evaluating whether the confrontation would be worthwhile. She knew from Samuel's teachings that grizzly bears rarely attacked adult horses unless they were desperate. But this one was hungry, and the combination of horse and small rider might seem like a viable opportunity. Thunder made a decision. That would change everything. With a sudden movement, he spun his body, positioning himself sideways between Sophia and the bear. Then, surprisingly, he took several steps in the opposite direction from Sophia, moving away from her. The movement was so unexpected that for a moment she thought of dismounting, but the trust built over years of partnership kept her in the saddle. The horse was deliberately drawing the predator's attention to himself, presenting himself as the larger, more obvious target. The bear, confused by the apparent separation between horse and rider, focused its attention on Thunder. It was the moment the horse had been waiting for. With a deafening whinny that echoed through the valley, he reared up on his hind legs. his front hooves slashing the air in an impressive display of strength. The bear hesitated, clearly reevaluating the situation. Thunder took advantage of the uncertainty to execute a series of movements Sophia had never experienced. Rapid turns, precise kicks that kept the predator at a distance, always repositioning himself to stay between the threat and his protected one. It was a deadly dance, choreographed by millions of years of evolution, predator and prey in their eternal ballet. It was in this moment of maximum tension that Sophia heard another sound cutting through the drama. Samuel's emergency horn. 3 sharp blasts that meant extreme danger. Her grandfather had noticed her absence and, with the intuition sharpened by decades of life in the mountains, knew exactly where to look. The sound of the horn was followed by others. Dogs barking, human voices approaching, the rumble of engines. The bear, now confronted with multiple threats, made the pragmatic decision to retreat. With a final growl of frustration, it disappeared into the vegetation as quickly as it had appeared. Thunder maintained his defensive posture for long seconds until he was sure the danger had passed. Only then did he approach Sophia, trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. When Michael and Karen arrived, followed by Thomas, Samuel, and 2 park rangers, they found Sophia dismounted, hugging Thunder's neck, silent tears streaming down her face. They were not tears of fear, but of profound understanding. She had finally understood the true nature of protective love. It wasn't about preventing her from facing dangers, but about being present when danger arrived. The expected reprimand did not come immediately. Michael, seeing Thunder's state, with foam on his coat and branch marks on his flanks, understood the magnitude of what had happened. Karen ran to hug her daughter, relief overcoming any anger. It was Thomas who examined Thunder, looking for injuries, and declared with a choked voice that the horse was physically okay, just exhausted. Samuel approached last, placing a calloused hand on Sophia's shoulder. His words were simple but loaded with meaning. Today, you two proved that true courage is not the absence of fear, but acting wisely despite it. Thunder didn't just protect you. He trusted you to do your part by remaining calm. This is the dance of life, little one, trusting and being trustworthy. In the days that followed, the story spread through the community like wildfire. Local journalists wanted interviews, animal behavior specialists came to examine Thunder, and Montana Ranch temporarily became the center of attention. But for Sophia, the most important thing happened in the quiet after the storm. Thomas began visiting her daily, helping to care for Thunder and processing the shared trauma together. During one of these afternoons, while grooming the horse in companionable silence, he held her hand and made a promise. No matter where his studies took him, he would always find his way back to her. The horseshoe around her neck, he said, would be his compass. The transformation in Michael was perhaps the deepest. The man who had tried to protect his daughter through restrictions understood that true protection came from preparation and trust. He began to accompany Sophia and Thunder on their rides, not as a guardian, but as a learner, letting his daughter teach him to listen to the forest as she listened. Karen channeled her emotions through art, creating a series of paintings that captured not only the dramatic event, but the family's entire journey of growth. The works, exhibited in a gallery in Denver, touched thousands of people with their honest portrayal of fear, love, and overcoming. The money raised was donated to animal-assisted therapy programs. The bear was eventually captured and relocated to a remote area of the national park, where abundant resources would decrease the need to approach inhabited areas. Rebecca Johnson led an educational program on coexistence with wildlife, using Sophia and Thunder's experience as an example of how mutual knowledge and respect could prevent tragedies. 6 months after the incident, at the Winter Festival, Sophia and Thunder gave a performance that would be etched in the memory of everyone present. It wasn't just the technical perfection of the movements, but the palpable connection between horse and rider that moved the audience. When Sophia dismounted and walked to the center of the arena, Thunder followed her without any command, positioning himself at her side as he always would. It was at that moment that Sophia spoke to the audience, her voice clear and strong. Thunder taught me that darkness is not the absence of light. It's just a different way of seeing. He showed me that faith is not believing that nothing bad will happen, but trusting that when it does, we won't be alone. Each of us has our own darkness to face, our own bears to confront. The question is, will we let fear imprison us, or will we find our own light in the connection with those we love? Thomas was in the front row, as he always had been and always would be. When Sophia came down from the arena, it was into his arms that she walked, guided not by thunder this time, but by an inner certainty that transcended any physical sense. The kiss they shared, soft and full of promises, was met with warm applause from the community that had witnessed their journey. Samuel, watching from the honor box, smiled with the wisdom of one who had lived long enough to recognize the cycles of life completing themselves. The great-granddaughter he held in his lap, born prematurely, but fighting with the same determination as her Aunt Sophia, would be the next generation to learn the lessons of the mountains. He could already imagine the stories he would tell about courage, about love, about the light that shines brightest in the darkness. Montana Ranch continued to be a refuge, but now it was also a symbol. Visitors came from afar to meet Thunder, the horse who had redefined the meaning of protection. But what they found was much more. A family that had transformed limitation into strength, fear into wisdom, and isolation into deep connection. Sophia established a program for visually impaired young people, where Thunder and other specially trained horses helped build confidence and independence. Thomas, even while studying at university, returned every weekend to help, bringing new knowledge that enriched the program. Their love, tested by distance and strengthened by determination, became another example that barriers exist to be overcome. The final act of this story happened on a spring morning, when Sophia woke with a different feeling. Thunder hadn't given his usual good morning whinny. Running to the stable, she found her friend lying in the hay, breathing with difficulty. The veterinarian confirmed what her heart already knew. At 28 years old, Thunder had reached the end of his journey. The family gathered around the noble animal. Thomas held Sophia as she stroked Thunder's mane, whispering words of gratitude and love. Samuel told one last story, about how the great spirits never truly leave us. They just change form. Karen quickly sketched the scene, capturing the peace that emanated from the moment despite the sadness. When Thunder took his last breath, with his head in Sophia's lap, something extraordinary happened. A young filly, born just a few months ago on the neighboring ranch, whinnied for the first time. The sound traveled through the valley exactly as Thunder's whinny had done years before, as if the protective spirit was passing on its mission. Sophia smiled through her tears, understanding the message. She stood up, still supported by Thomas, and walked towards the new sound. The filly, who would be named Hope, approached cautiously and gently blew on Sophia's face, exactly as Thunder had done in their first meeting. The cycle began anew. The light continued to shine, and faith remained unwavering. That night, as the family gathered to share memories of Thunder, Sophia asked the question that would echo in all hearts present. When was the last time we allowed someone to protect us not because they saw us as weak, but because they recognized the strength that exists in accepting love? When will we let our own light shine through the darkness, guided by the faith that we never walk alone? And you, who have followed this journey of overcoming and unconditional love, at what moment will you allow hope to blossom in your own desert? When will you recognize that the greatest protections come not from walls we build, but from the bridges of trust we dare to cross? The story of Sophia and Thunder reminds us that true vision does not come from the eyes, but from the heart willing to see beyond appearances, to trust beyond fear, and to love beyond limitations.